This is showing the spinal cord, how we break it apart, the enlargements, the tapering, the equina, and what we have, one of the things not mentioned is this terminal phylum, which is the nerve that actually terminates within the sacral area. Okay, so we've got that there also. The wrappings around the spinal cord, they're termed our meninges. We probably understand the meninges because we've all probably heard of something called meningitis. All right, and this is what meningitis is. It's an inflammation of this covering around the brain and the spinal cord. It's a 3-layer anatomical part, okay? Basically, we're separating or creating a separation around this very delicate tissue. Because if you think about the brain, you think about the spinal cord, both are encased in bone, okay? So you've got something that's very delicate up against something that's really hard, all right? So we've got these 3 layers. The 3 layers of the meninges, we're going to have an outermost layer, an innermost layer, and a layer in between. The one that's the toughest, the dura mater, M-A-T-E-R, okay? The dura mater is the one that's next to the bone. It's the outermost layer. The innermost layer, the pia mater, okay, delicate mother, that's what it means, is the one that's right at that soft tissue. And it's running along all of the ridges. Okay, it's actually right there on it. Okay, in between that outermost layer, the innermost layer, we've got what's termed arachnoid mater. What do you think of when you hear arachnoid? Spiders. And with spiders, we get spider webs. All right. Now, in this area for the coverings, it's termed arachnoid because it has all of these blood vessels, all right? It has all the blood vessels. And then, in between the dura and the pia, we have something called the CSF, the cerebrospinal fluid, which is very important, okay? And we get this fluid that gets there, and it has all this access to these blood vessels. Why would that be important? What's the job of the CSF?
Keep it lubricated.
Keep it lubricated, moist.
Absorb shock.
Absorb shock. Cleanse. Provide needed materials to the tissue.
Isn't it one of the only fluids that can enter somewhere, some region, I think?
That can what?
That can only enter into some region?
Yes, it's only going to be within this area around the spinal cord and the brain. And it's going to have a specific area in the brain where it's going to get produced, and it's going to have a specific area of the brain where it gets to empty out. It's really kind of cool, okay? So the fluid is very important. So if it's in contact with all of those blood vessels, everything's getting to move in and out. So it's really kind of cool. So if we look at a segment, this would be if we could take and do a cut straight across and just look straight down onto the spinal cord, okay? We would get to see, based on looking at this would get to be our spinous processes from a vertebra, all right? This would be our body. And then the makeup that we get, that hole that gets to go down through it, is where we're going to see the spinal cord. Now, this structure that you see for the spinal cord looks very plain and simple, right? Well, this little butterfly that's in the middle, okay, all this stuff around it, and then they're trying to show the representation of how we have the connection to a spinal nerve and how that spinal nerve will exit between those bones. Is everybody following me? Okay, so we're going to see that we have our anterior, posterior, we've got the wrappings of our meninges, we've got the spinal cord, and we've got exits of spinal nerves. Looks like, what it seems like, that spinal nerve that's exiting, well, looks like I've got that spinal nerve, and that spinal nerve comes up and does this number. It does. Okay? Because note that we have part of it going to the posterior portion, part of it to the ventral or the anterior. There's a reason for that. What types of information did we say just a few minutes ago travels? Sensory information, motor. So that tells me that spinal nerve, okay, that's exiting. I have to make sure that spinal information, sensory coming in, gets to go one place, and then my motor comes out on the other side. Does that make sense? So the structure is very important. Looking at this, just like this little picture right here, does it help you have an understanding now if somebody gets a spinal nerve injury? Because remember, if I'm saying a spinal nerve injury, that happened out here. And if that injury happened out here, I'm affecting what goes in and what comes out. Is that correct? Yes. Now, what if I said they have a spinal cord injury? Do you now understand what's meant by spinal cord versus spinal nerve? Because if it were a spinal cord injury, it's going to be this area through here. All right? Which can have an effect throughout the entire, like if it happens here, it's going to have an effect for everything else down. But a spinal nerve might just simply be a certain area of the body. Does that make sense? Okay, so the structure is very important. Ever heard of this right here? Okay, those of you who are in childbearing years, if you decide that, okay, I think it's time, you're going to probably get information from your doctor, your friends, your family, to start taking folic acid before you decide to get pregnant. Spina bifida is where those vertebrae, the bones, they don't make a complete arch. So the articulation is not present correctly. It's not correct. And so that allows for these little meninges, the very delicate coverings, okay, to poof out. In some cases, they can identify it I know like certain things they do now, they can actually do in utero. Like they can go in and fix it while you're still pregnant. They can do the surgery on the baby there. Sometimes they're ready to do the surgery when the baby is born. But sometimes it can be so severe that the child's going to be paralyzed for their entire life. So it is something that's, I wouldn't say that it is common, okay, but it does happen. And so that's why and one of the things that they have found is folic acid, that B vitamin, becomes very important for the development of its tissues. So if we're thinking about looking at that spinal cord, taking it, cutting it, and just looking straight down into it, this is a view of what it really looks like. So it does look like it has that little butterfly in the middle of it. Now, this is termed gray matter. This is termed the white matter. Why? Okay, let's think back to part 1, when you were learning about the structure of the nerves, of the neurons. What could the axons be wrapped in? Myelin. Okay? Now, myelin, what type of material is that? It's a lipid protein. Uh-oh, lipid. How do we know that? As a what? A fat. Think about meat you go buy. You go to the store. You're looking at the steaks. And you're thinking, oh man, that ribeye is really nice and marbled. What does that mean? Fatty. What color is it? White. So what does that tell me about this white matter? It's got the myelin. Now, the gray matter, guess what? Doesn't have that much. Okay? Some people, might have the idea that it doesn't have any. That's wrong. Okay? There is some there. It's just a little bit of a difference present. Okay? So, we've got the heavily myelinated, the ones that are not quite as heavily myelinated. So, when we say the gray matters, now, neuron cell bodies. Neuron cell bodies. Not as much myelin is present. Why did I just do that? Because if that's referring to my neuron cell body, I've still got dendrites, axons, and terminal buds on this neuron. Why is that not included in the definition for the gray matter? Not that it doesn't have it. When we look at this structure, okay, when we look at this structure, remember, the nerve, okay, is the part, and this is going to be the axon, okay? The axon's going to be making it part of the spinal nerve. And the terminal buds are what it comes in contact with. Now take a minute and let that sink in. When you look at the spinal cord, the nerve cell bodies are in this portion that are wrapped in bone. The axons of that nerve cell body are the part of it that's exiting out to be the spinal nerve. And that means that axon comes around to something. It's going to come around to a skeletal muscle. It's going to come around to a smooth muscle. I'm not going to get into the heart yet. Okay? It's going to come around to a skeletal muscle. It's going to come around to a smooth muscle. It's going to come around to a gland. What do I mean by gland? What do you think of? Huh? What? Huh? My endocrine system. When I tell you, these two systems are going to control the body.
And I just want to get something clear. Endocrine system deal with glands, and the exocrine is deal with ducts.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Endocrine is going to stay completely within our body. Exocrine, think of something like a sweat gland or an oil gland or something like that. Now, stop and think about that for a second. Okay? Because I really want you to get your head wrapped around that. It's a pretty cool structure, right? Think about it. So, the white matter means we're dealing with our axons for the most part. Because when I think about that axon that's got to leave the protection of the bone, it needs a protection of some sort. And since this is a spinal nerve, okay, that's exiting out of the bone, coming around to somewhere else on my body, it's got to have some protection. When we get our myelin, what we think of as the myelin, the Schwann cells, wrapped, 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 okay? Get to the little terminal buds. The terminal buds are going to innervate something. Is everybody with me? Okay. This is the structure I'm trying to get you to think about. Okay? Now, at this point, the structure we're talking about is our spinal cord and spinal nerves. What have I not talked about? Like alien. Okay? I haven't talked about the brain and the little cranials coming out. Okay? So, at this point, spinal, spinal, spinal. For the gray matter that's going to be located in that spinal cord, like I said, looks like a butterfly. Oops.